Women of Reddit, what things do men do that frighten you without them even realizing it? Story 1. I love hiking and have it in my dating profile as one of my hobbies. Men have gotten really angry when I don't want to do that as a first date. I go with my cousin, friends, and kids, but I know them all well. I'm not going into the woods alone with a stranger. Story 2. I work in retail. I had helped out an older man and afterwards he went on his way. Nothing unusual. He came back shortly after and unexpectedly shoved his hand in my vest pocket. I was a little blindsided. Turns out he was just giving me a $20 tip, which was appreciated, though he could have just handed it to me. Story 3. I had a friend once who occasionally mentioned that he could just overpower me if he really wanted to, and then laughed. He was surprised that I refused to be alone with him when the other people of our friend group weren't around because he was just joking and not a threat. Needless to say, I left that friend group and him behind eventually. Those two. Story 4. First date. Didn't really know him. Comes to my apartment to pick me up, invite him in, and he proceeds to tell me how he is going to rearrange the furniture when he moves in. Back in the 70s, I always picked up hitchhikers. Picked up this guy, he gets in, then looks at me and says, "You know you should really be careful about who you pick up." Guy I was living with. "I know you will never leave me because you can't outrun a bullet." Story 5. My BF and I were playing. We actually play together, oh Mao. And he plopped on top of me during our play and pinned me down by using one hand of his to control both my wrists on top of my head so he could tickle me. At first I was laughing because we were playing, but a few seconds in, I had this scary realization that I could absolutely not wiggle out of his grip by my own volition. One hand! I asked him to release me eventually, and he did, but I just was left thinking, if he wanted to not release me, it's literally a possibility he could control me with just his strength. This is a terrifying realization, just knowing I'll never be as strong as the average man, even with my weight workouts/endurance training. I don't have the testosterones. Story 6. What amazes me are that there are so many examples in this thread you should be frightened about. And it's not that the men don't realize that, it's just that they don't cate. Every second comment here is about a guy testing out how far he can go in a jokingly manner. Further down, joking about saying no or grabbing me. Yeah, he doesn't respect your boundaries from the start and is testing you, maybe unconsciously. Trust your gut feeling. Story 7 was at the gym with my teenage sister once. This is a family-friendly gym. We were both walking on the treadmill side by side at the end of the line of treadmills, so it could be just us with a ton of space. She only has one on her right side, and that's it. At the time, there is no one else on the treadmills because it's a small gym, and at that time of day, no one is really there. This middle-aged man picks the one on the edge right next to my younger sister. She's uncomfortable, but we ignore it. Our timers run out, so we get off to sanitize the treadmills we used. When we get off, this man practically jumps off his treadmill at the same time as us. Nothing else happened, but we were a bit creeped out. He was watching us on the treadmill and watching us as we walked away. Nothing crazy, but my younger sister was freaked out. Story 8. I thought about this recently. Stepping into my house to deliver a package is a no-no unless I've given you permission to do so. A small book-sized parcel does not require you to step over the threshold of my front door and stand over me to give me the parcel. Asking me if I live alone at the same time you're standing in my home that I didn't invite you into is a major ick. Please do not do that. It's inappropriate. Also, the obligatory, please don't violently punch walls or objects around me, then act like you're shocked when I say this is an over-the-top way to react to minor disappointments. You're shocked I'm uncomfortable around you now? I didn't know it was so easy for you to tap into your anger and violence the minute you don't get what you want. So no, now I don't want you anywhere near me. I grew up around many violent men I couldn't get away from who were on a hair trigger. I will take every chance I can to avoid having violent men in my life now that it's my choice. Story 9. Taxi drivers randomly asking me if I'm married or live alone or other very personal questions like that. It's stupid, but I feel kind of vulnerable locked into in a car with a strange man at night and more often than not in an unfamiliar city with a foreign language. I rarely travel by cab in my home city as I don't ever need to. I've had a few bad experiences with them asking me to go for a drink, etc. in pidgin English. Very creepy, and I'm not someone who scares easily. Edited just to say I'm in Europe, if that makes any difference. Story 10. On 2 occasions, I found notes left under the windshield wiper of my car. Random guys who saw me and wondered if I'd like to go out. One was kind of sweet, but he was a landscaper at my apartment building, so he knew my car and apartment number. The second was pretty uali explicit. I worked in a high-rise with a big parking lot. He mentioned he's held the door open for me before, said he'd never bother me again if I wasn't interested. Security let me park by the door for a month or so, knowing they're out there watching you and you don't know if they're a good person or not. Story 11. When a man is angry or even just irritated around me, I can feel it. It fills the room even if it's not directed at me. I instinctively default to fawning to keep the situation from escalating, because even if I'm not the target of the anger, I could become collateral. And if a man raises his voice at me, I actually just break down. Thanks, Dad. Story 12. My ex and I were laying down snuggling on the couch, and for whatever reason, he started tickling me. He's thinking it's all in good fun. And yet I literally could not breathe or talk or get him to stop because he would not let up. I've also hated being tickled my whole life. I find nothing joyful or fun from it, just pain. He was laying on top of me, so I couldn't get up and get away. I just felt like I was slowly suffocating because this dude has never had someone tickle him nonstop. I guess he never realized you have to give them a breath break. So I start sobbing. Problem is, because I'm incapable of taking a breath, he thought I was laughing because of the airy wheeze coming out of me. He finally got off me and I jumped up and ran to my bedroom and locked the door and continued crying. I was absolutely terrified. Once I calmed down, we talked it out and he commented that he didn't know I didn't like it because when he's tickled, he flails his whole body. I told him my whole body was bucking and flailing, trying to get him off me, but since he was laying on top of me and outweighs me by 100 pounds, there was nothing I could do. I feel like that was a wake-up call for us both. It made me truly realize how vulnerable and helpless I am against a man. And he realized that you cannot sit there and tickle someone until they pee out. Nowadays, it's a hard and fast rule with any guy I date. You tickle me once, we're done. It impacted me that much. Story 13. I work construction, and I'm usually the only woman on job sites. Well, my company puts a little sticker with our names on our hard hats. I had my first and last name on my hard hat, and everything was fine for nearly 3 years. I'm taking a break and sitting in corner on my phone and eating. A guy approaches and sits like 2 inches to my side. He starts a conversation, then pulls out his phone and shows me my Facebook account. When he walked away, the first thing I did was peel my sticker off my hat. Story 14. I genuinely don't understand how men don't realize this is creepy, but I work at a convenience store, sometimes overnight or late night, and men, anyone but especially men, asking, "Are you here alone?" or "What time do you get off?" is very disconcerting. Offering me a ride when I'm walking, I appreciate it, and I know you're trying to be nice, but getting defensive when I decline gets kind of scary. I don't accept rides from women either. We don't have to make this political. Yes, the weather sucks. But if I wasn't prepared to walk in it, I have enough sense to make other arrangements. But thank you, you're so sweet to offer. Story 15. Anger and raising voice. Even when not angry at me, anyone specifically. Even when raised voice isn't actually because he's angry. Lots of men can sound angry when they aren't. And having someone bigger than you suddenly start yelling can be intimidating. Standing too close, staring, etc., calling out from cars. Being flirty, when you don't already know each other, can be extremely worrying because while some men might think, understandably, how are they meant to express interest if they can't flirt/act on it, most women are going to worry about how the man will respond. If she says no, is he going to get angry and aggressive? If she says yes, is he going to get pushy and demanding? Oh, but I wouldn't do that. Maybe not, but pretty much every adult woman has at least one experience she can speak of where someone did do it. Story 16. I was out with friends at a local pub watching a live band. It became a regular Friday night outing with a few drinks, dancing, and having lots of fun. A friend introduced me to a guy friend of hers. He seemed nice, and I'd talk to him when I saw him over the next few weeks. At the end of the night, I was dancing alone by the jukebox while waiting for my girlfriends to come out of the restroom. This guy came over to me, began dancing with me, then suddenly picked me up and started running towards the back door with me. I was screaming as loudly as I could. He kept running, so I continued screaming and struggling. About 10 other people in the bar watching. He put me down and started laughing, saying he's only joking, calm down. Then it's my fault for overreacting, WTF. Not funny, I was freaking out. Story 17. Not taking no for an answer and following me is one I experienced. I was walking home from meeting a friend for a meal back to student accommodation, and a man smoking outside a pub called out to me asking my name and to come over. I made clear I wasn't interested and walked away, so he followed me, calling out again. I noticed after a couple of streets, he was still walking behind me, so I dipped inside a takeaway place where a group of students were inside and told them I was being followed by a man. One of the guys from that group and the people working there went outside to look, but it seems like he left after I went inside and spoke to them, as they couldn't find him. The student group were nice enough to walk me home in case he came back, but he didn't. Also being aggressively angry even when it's not directed at me. Again, a fairly recent story was a male student I lived with in halls had an argument and threw a fit in the kitchen while I was in there and picked up a toaster, then threw it across the room. It's an extreme example, but I'm the only other person in there, even if he's not angry with me. The only way to leave was to walk past him, and he's a fairly big rugby player build type who could hurt me if he wanted to. I just sat there terrified until he stormed out. Story 18. I'm a dude, but I'll say simply existing. There have been times where I notice a woman completely avoid me because I'm a man. I'm aware that I can look intimidating, and I don't blame you at all if you're by yourself and just want to play it safe. Even as a kid, though, walking home from school and just thinking in my own little world with my head down, probably thinking of video games or music, I'd notice a girl also walking home from school start getting nervous and pick up the pace simply because I'm heading the same direction home. Those moments can kind of hurt sometimes, but I get it. Story 19. When men pick me up like friends, I had a friend who used to pick me up whenever we were hanging out, and I got terrified even though he's a good guy. I would panic because my mind immediately went to, oh my gosh, I better not piss him off, since I knew if he got violent, which he never would. But if he got violent, he would be able to overpower me and pick me up without a fight from me. Thankfully, he never used that against me. Story 21. Thing that always catches me off guard is when a guy is walking behind me at night, even if he's just going about his own business. I automatically get tense and start doing all the little things to feel safer, like checking over my shoulder or subtly holding my keys. It's just instinct at this point. I know it sounds like overthinking, but it's just something many women do to feel safer. Story 21. At the risk answering a question not aimed at me. Something I was called out on once was forgetting how naturally intimidating a man can be to a woman half their size. A coworker once screwed up bad and caused me to miss an important project deadline and have to redo a load of work. Now I consider myself to be about as intimidating as a block of cheese, and I'm usually pretty chill, but I angrily told her how much she screwed me over, causing her complain to my boss about how scared she was. Afterwards, I realized how intimidating it must have been for her to have a cross 6'2", 200-pound guy telling her off. It stuck with me, and I always try to keep it in mind when I'm interacting with women who don't know me well. Story 22. General shouting. Even if it's not aimed at me, my heart races, in a bad way, when a man or a group of men start aggressively raising their voices. I'm generally not a scared, timid, or easily frightened person with men or anyone. It's just this. It's definitely something I've not dealt with from childhood and not a reflection on men in general. I need to sort it out, really. Story 23. When they don't notice the stop signals, like when you're giving one-word answers or clearly trying to wrap up a conversation, but they keep pushing. Or when they make jokes about protecting you or keeping you safe in a way that feels more possessive than caring. It's kind of unsettling when it feels like they're trying to control the situation without realizing it. And don't get me started on the intense stare, like when they're looking at you too intensely, especially if you're not even talking to them. It's like, dude, chill. We're not in a thriller movie. Story 24. I remember when I was 18, I was buying ice cream with friends. I was the last in line at the shop, and the man at the counter was much older. He seemingly misheard my order and went to get me a smaller ice cream cone than I had asked for. I was very petite and shy and didn't like to cause problems, so I let it go. Not a big deal, I thought. He kept talking at me as he got everything to make the cone, and looking at me expectantly as if he expected me to do something. I felt odd, but said nothing. Finally, he laughed really loudly and mockingly and said, "I can't believe you were just going to let me do that. You asked for a different size and you're just going to let me make the wrong one." And he had this eating grin like he was enjoying my discomfort. I laughed politely to end the interaction. I took the ice cream and shuffled out quickly. I felt strangely humiliated and angry at myself. That memory stuck out as super uncomfortable to me because it was a man just ing with an obviously shy young woman just because he could. He chose to intentionally mishear me to see how long I'd let him get my order wrong just because it amused him. It on the surface probably looked like a funny, quirky little interaction, but it felt sinister and mean-spirited. Story 25. Stand in a group and make me walk through the middle of them to get by. Guys at my old workplace used to congregate in the hall, and it felt like I was running the gauntlet just to get by. No one ever threatened me, and I doubt they gave it a thought. But sometimes I wish they knew what it was like to be at least 6 inches shorter and 100 pounds lighter than everyone around them. Story 26 was in my mid-20s, doing field work, tagging plants in California near Sonoma. A guy working in a field nearby started to walk over, and I started walking back to my car. This was middle of the day. Then he said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." Well, that's exactly what someone who would hurt me would say. I just said I was leaving anyways and bolted to my car. Story 27. I had a man reach over the counter at work and grab my arm to look at my tattoo. I was stunned, and after finally backing away, he was like, "Sorry, it just looked cool. I wanted to see." It was extra because I kind of liked him as a regular, but after that I couldn't help but physically back away every time he came up to the counter. Story 28. I will caveat this by saying I have some parking lot specific trauma, but I hate it when men come walking up on me really fast in parking lots. Like, dude, there's so much room here. Why are you on my heels? And they are usually parked just down the same aisle or something. But I've literally had panic attacks because of this. Or when men approach me in a parking lot. Like, please don't comment on my groceries, just don't engage. Again, I have parking lot specific trauma, but literally sometimes sit crying in my car because men got too close in parking lots. I wish men would remember that parking lots aren't usually safe places for women. Also, my niece and I go to parks a lot with her daughter, and we often find men will come in when we are the only ones there just to sit in their car. I get they might be on a work break, but it makes us uncomfortable so often that we leave. Like, if you see a public space is occupied by a couple of women who are alone, maybe don't hang in your car and creep. Story 29. Not taking me seriously when I instinctively noticed danger. Went to a spa with my friend. She has natural D-sized breasts and is very skinny. That being said, she doesn't really notice when guys are creeps to her. At the spa, we were nude, and one dude sees her and his entire demeanor changed. His face was frightening, and his mouth stayed half open the whole time I saw him. Everywhere we walked, dude followed us to see more of her. So I never left her side, but I didn't want to tell her until it was needed because she can either get scared or get mad at me. The only time I mentioned it was when I had to use the bathroom, and she said she'll wait for me outside. Dude finally relented and left us, but his face was frightening. It's hard to describe why. Maybe not that much would happen at a public spa, but getting cornered when you're nude is also something you don't want to happen. I tell some guy who's interested in me about this, and he laughs it off and basically berates the fact that I was worried in the first place. What about a compliment? Hey, good on you for protecting your friend. No, nothing bad was going on. He knows this for sure, even though he wasn't there. It's like they think I'm going to get a panic attack right then and there while telling the story or something. That dude did this a lot, BTW. I went to something with him, but I had to ride back on my bike. The road back was on a small path with thorny bush around it and no streetlights. Just a small dark path next to water. So I make sure I don't drink anything and that I leave on time so I don't have to ride in the dark. Bro started acting sad when I had to leave on time, arguing that it's not that dangerous. Like, yeah, it is. Maybe people don't drive there often, but you just need one creep. Not to mention I could get hurt by thorns. Take me seriously and listen to what I say. Story 30. Come on, show me what you learned in self-defense CL, but like in a mocking way where you're trying to prove the CL was useless. Please don't do this. She's not afraid for her life and is probably feeling self-conscious and doubting herself. She's going to do some half-hearted version of whatever she learned, and you're going to make her look and feel. If she ever needs that confidence, it will not be there. Please just don't. Story 31. My husband is a kind person, but of course arguments happen. During one of our rows, he stood between me and the open door. The door behind me was blocked, and I felt trapped. He's never hit me or even threatened me, but because he stood between me and an escape route, I panicked. Men, always make sure women feel they can get away from you if they need to. Always be aware and don't ever block their exit, even if there's never been a physical altercation between you and even if your arguments are pretty tame. We need to know we can escape. Story 32. Confessing a mistake. On a camping trip, maybe 20 people, I invited a couple of male friends to play one-ball croquet after dark. A woman I recognized from earlier in the day, but didn't know wanted to come with. Okay, let's go. This is going to be silly fun. The route was through the forest, over a small fallen tree, across a trickle of a creek, and through a fire to end up back at where we were camping for the night. The route was planned in advance with glow-in-the-dark paint on the ball and flags. It took about half an hour to complete. It didn't dawn on me that the one woman in our four-person group would feel unsafe. She asked to go with us, but then started sobbing with relief when we got back. It turned out that she was nervous the whole time, but hid it. She gave no indication that she was miserable. She played along and seemed to be having fun. After some discussion, it turned out that it was her first time camping. She reached a moment where she realized she was alone in the forest with 3 men she didn't know. Then there we were making IC jokes about mossy balls lost in the dark, but it was really scary for her. She fawned in fear while we were goofing around. Looking at it now as an adult, I can see how bumbling around in the dark in an unfamiliar place with 3 male strangers was not okay. Please be more observant and sensitive than I was. Story 33. A stranger asking me where I live or work during small talk happens regularly on public transit. They may be trying to find a conversation topic like what field I work in or if I'm local and therefore can provide a recommendation about someplace nearby. Or they could actually be asking for very personal and dangerous information. What do you do for work? Or ever check out that new spot that just opened? Is much better. Story 34. Sometimes I'll be riding my bike and guys will slow down in their cars to try and talk to me. I hate that. I mean, I'm usually armed and they don't know it, but I still hate it. Sometimes if I see they're slowing down so that I catch up, I'll straight up stop in place until they get the picture. I just don't understand the logic. Like, you think I'm just gonna get off my bike and hang out with you? Story 35. Could you all please give less obvious answers? I know not to tell a woman I could rape her. That's weird and creepy. What about the more subtle things like humming to a song you're playing uncomfortable? Is riding a bicycle past you while you're running uncomfortable? Is being overly friendly or helpful in a retail setting uncomfortable? Is it uncomfortable if I'm a regular at a bar you work at and you're not telling me to leave because I tip good, but uncomfortable because I'm not doing a good job hiding it, that I'm into you? Anything else more subtle but uncomfortable, please let me know. It's how I learn to be better. Story 36. Someone in my building, probably a man, slipped a note under my apartment door that said something like, "I wish the sun shined as bright as my heart when I see you," and a phone number. An anonymous note with no identifying information other than their number is a little unsettling. I'm not a fan of them showing that they know who I am and watch me, but the only way for me to know who they are is to contact them. I now always check for more notes and get nervous when I see my neighbors. Story 37. A dad here. Our daughter worked at Home Depot while in college for 1 year, and older 50-plus guys would just walk up and ask her out on dates. She quickly realized their type and would give them a disgusted, "You are kidding" face before they even opened their mouths. All of the young women working there said it has always been a problem. WTF, guys? Story 38. Asking unprovoked questions about self-protection. For instance, a young man I worked with started a conversation by asking if I usually carry pepper spray. Then he dropped and did 20 push-ups. I'm still not sure what that was about. Also, walking directly behind you in a parking lot at night. This kicks my fight or flight into gear so fast, and usually they're totally unaware and genuinely not trying to follow me. Story 39. During college, I attended CLEs full-time, worked part-time, and did extracurriculars, so I had a pretty busy schedule. One of my Cal mates, we only had one CL together, memorized all of my schedules and kept pressuring me to hang out with him on the only free time I had. At the time, I thought it was weird how specific he was when he asked to hang out. I wasn't close to him, and I didn't tell him any of my schedules, which meant he most likely stalked me to get that info. He probably thought it was romantic to try and work around the only free time I had, but I found it was extremely off-putting. Story 40. I'm short, so basically all men are taller than me. I have had occasions where men would get right in front of me and raise their voice and also scream at me. They are joking, but 100/100th times I nervous laugh along because even though I'm strong, they are stronger. I had a guy wrap his hands around my throat and skis while shaking me before as he was joking. I was never alone with him after that. Story 41. Frightened may be too strong of a word, but still, it's a memory from when I was a teen, but I still have shivers when I think about it. I was in a big friend group and the guys liked to play wrestle with each other and stuff like that. I sometimes got in these fights too. They usually were gentler with me than each other, but once I got held down and realized I literally can't move, and I'm helpless. It was the day I realized that if a guy wanted to hurt me, I would be able to do exactly nothing. The play fight stopped being funny to me. Story 42. Had an Uber driver once who started telling me, unprompted, about how he was also in personal security and knew all these martial arts tricks for disabling people. Lots of stories to get the message across about how strong and dangerous he was. I think he was trying to impress me, but I was in the back sharing my live location and his details with friends just in case. Story 43. Everything. Standing too close to me. Parking next to me when there are a million spots around me. Movers pulling my information off of my moving paperwork and texting me about going on a date. Maintenance guys audibly telling the workers in my apartment that I have cameras when they notice them. Guys in the dog park that don't have a dog with them. Guys that offer shots at the bar and bring them to you instead of letting you watch the bartender pour them, etc., etc., etc. He asked about it every time I saw him. I kept making excuses, BC. I had to work with this guy. And he ended up using Christmas as an excuse to buy me a Crunchyroll subscription, saying now you don't have any excuse not to watch it. I barely talked to him ever again. He moved after a while and I still never redeemed the subscription. Not the most unsettling or frightening interaction, but one of the most bizarrely so. Story 47. There are a majority of men who don't understand no means no, but then there are some who take it literally and fail to understand that no response is also a no. So when I ask a new date, their understanding of consent and they say no means no, which is popularized as a slogan for consent and is right, it scares me a little. Yes, I might be getting into details, but I feel it's better be afraid than sorry. It should always be no until you hear a yes. Story 48. Went on maybe 2 dates with a guy and wasn't feeling it. He was persistent that we just talk about it and suggested the open rooftop of his condo complex. What? No, I am not going onto a rooftop with someone I just broke up with. What a crazy suggestion. He probably didn't think anything of it, but it was terrifying. He was twice my size and strength. Story 49. I was at work and there was a new employee doing prep in the back. He immediately addressed me by name, and I had never met him before, and I still have no idea how he got my name. He started asking me very personal questions, my age, my marital status, if I had or wanted kids. I saw him work one other shift and then he was gone. Apparently, he made other employees uncomfortable as well. When a man calls you by name and you have never been introduced, it's frightening. When you've known them less than 5 minutes and you work with the motherer and they immediately want to know personal information, it's also frightening. Guys, you may think this makes you seem friendly and outgoing, but it is terrifying. Please stop doing this. Story 50. Insisting on helping in invasive ways or in ways that create a power differential. For example, my 70-plus-year-old neighbor, who I'm sure thought he was just being nice, was out with his leaf blower and offered to do my sidewalk, wherein he pushed his way into my yard, blocking my exits, and wouldn't leave until he was satisfied that the job was done, rather than me telling him no, it wasn't necessary, I was taking care of things. Or the guy at the bar who buys you a drink so he can sit too close and push into your personal space, and then expect some sort of reward for the nice thing he did. Or the guy who loads your groceries into your car over your protests and wants your phone number in exchange. Oh, and speaking of phone numbers, when they insist on calling you right then to make sure the number you gave them is real. If we gave you a fake number, it's because we don't trust you. Doing this shows us that we're right not to trust you. Story 51, I was online dating and met a guy who I was going to meet for drinks. He got mad when I suggested meeting downtown. He insisted on picking me up. I said no, it's better to just meet, and he blew up at me online. He said, if I don't trust him, maybe I should find someone different. Okay, I will find someone different. Needless to say, that date never happened. Story 52. There's a plethora of things to say, but the one that instantly came to mind, because in limiting myself to one LOL, is slamming your hands on a table. At my wedding, one of my husband's friends kept slamming his hands every time he wanted to make a joke or enunciate something strongly, and every woman at the table, myself included, would flinch every time. Story 53. Recently had someone invite themselves to my place and show up when I said no already. So I'd say crossing boundaries because I don't think most men understand we have those boundaries, and when they are crossed, it scares us, even if it's something innocent. This might not be without realizing it, but this dude had no concept of it. Very small snippet of what happened the other day, but I told him I want to cut ties. He couldn't respect my boundaries after multiple times that I communicated with him about it. Red flags and scared me for sure. Story 54. They like to stand in front of the only exit or entrance when talking to me in a room where there's just the two of us. Essentially, you're blocking my exit and forcing me to acknowledge you and be nice to you just so I can escape. I don't think it's something most of them are conscious about because I get some confused looks when I ask them to please move away from the door. It's just something that triggers my fight or flight instinct because my ex likes to block my exit just to shout and scream at me when he's in one of his moods. Story 55, TBH. I can't tell if he knew it was scary or not, but one time my friend and I were hanging by a fire late at night. He had been going through it and we were talking about his problems. At one point, there was a moment of silence and he said, "You ever think about doing something really bad to someone?" I quickly said no and ended the night as soon as I could, then went no contact right after lol. Story 56. The comments in some of these women of Reddit tell us underscore about men threads all seem to be describing the behavior of 14-year-old boys. This is one of those threads. Edit. The downvotes indicate I offended some people. I'm not criticizing anyone of either gender. It's just that my own personal experiences IRL tell me that the ridiculous behaviors described in the comments here are only displayed by less than 1% of adult men, but they are common in 14, 16-year-old boys. Story 57. When you ask for a single-digit date at either your house or my house where you cook dinner. Sir, I don't know you. We're meeting in public. And once you make that suggestion, we're not only meeting in public, but during the day too. When me and my husband separated, I joined a dating website, and if I had 5 people that I matched with during that week, the above was a recommendation from majority of them. I got called a gold digger because I refused to do something like this and recommended a restaurant or a cafe instead of taking food and drinks in the home of a stranger. Story 58. Refusing to end a date especially if we are saying something to get out of it. This might have been more of a me thing, but back when I was dating, I had such a hard time being blunt and saying, I'm done with this and want to leave, so I would make up excuses by saying I was tired and should head home, or I needed to grocery shopping, etc. I'm a pretty bubbly social person, so guys always thought we were having the best time and would always say, oh, let's go do this first. And one creepy guy actually took me to the grocery store instead of taking me home so I could do my grocery shopping with him so he could extend the date. Also, some random advice from me related to this. Keep first dates to no more than a couple hours. It's good practice to have a good time and end it before the other person gets sick of you, so they want to go out with you again if you are having a great time. And if the opposite is true, why would you want to waste more of your time with someone who is not having a good time and you won't see again? Story 59 guy put his hand on my shoulder to move me out of the way so he could get by me while in a line, but there was definitely enough space for him to have just walked by me. I suppose it's not that bad because maybe he was trying to be polite but didn't like that. Another guy was trying to chat me up in a public hangout spot and grab my guitar to start trying to play it without asking. Was not happy about that. No one touches my guitar but me and my close friends. Without even asking. Story 60. Closing my office door, especially if he looks irritated. Not much spooks me, but I have had coworkers come into my office upset and close my office doors. Both times the employee was upset about someone else and just wanted to vent, but all I can think of is, damn, I'm trapped and don't have a way to get out. These two guys in particular are good employees and I have a good relationship with them. But I have heard and seen things go south quickly, so my gut reaction to being stuck in an 8 feet x 8 feet room with an upset person will always be run. Story 61. Walking close at the same pace late at night. My BF was showing me around with his phone and I told him to slow down or try to speed up because there was a girl walking in front of him and he asked why. 3 minutes later, he called back and told me that the girl went practically running down a random road. I'm like, I told you you're a male over 6 feet tall and a foreigner. Even I wouldn't take the chance. Story 62. I had to end a friendship with a guy because I'd asked him not to give me any special treatment, but he wouldn't listen. He thought it was essential to show me how important I was to him through big romantic-esque gestures, when really, it made me see he couldn't respect my wishes and might not respect my consent either. It would have meant more for him to have followed my request of little things, and we may still have been friends. Story 63. When you're talking and they get physical, grabbing your shoulder just a bit too hard. Like, sir, I do not know you. I don't want to stand that close to you, more or less have you grabbing my arms and shaking me. I don't care if you think it's funny or something. I'm not a doll for you to just grab and move. It also reminds me that you're a threat until proven otherwise. Story 64. Honestly, it's always been men that come up and try to ask me questions about myself. This happened a lot when I was in my 20s. I used to smoke, so men would just come up to me and start asking what I'm doing outside of a store. I wouldn't smoke in my car, so I'd light up by the ashtray if I was out and about. It seems a cute young woman smoking by herself immediately means I want to get to know random strangers. I would get offers to go to their homes down the street. Super gross. I quit smoking so I don't have to deal with that anymore. Story 65. I've worked in jewelry repair and sales the past 4 years. Doesn't matter what gender, but especially men. Please stop asking what the most expensive item is. It's a female-dominated industry, so there are oftentimes jewelry stores that don't have a single male employee. And it's usually a man asking what the most expensive item is. If it's a kid, I'll show them, though. They're just curious. Story 66. Parking in front of my house while I'm alone outside. I'm in a cul-de-sac, and for whatever reason, they love to pull up to my curb, despite tons of other out-of-the-way places to pull off in the immediate vicinity and figure out their directions or whatever TF they do. They don't care if I'm out there gardening or playing with my dog. They just roll up and sit with their vehicles running. That also goes for pulling up and parking right next to me to sit in their car while I'm sitting in my own car in a remote part of the parking lot to eat my lunch or whatever. Story 67. I run a lot, often in the dark and always on trails. If I see someone, I always say good morning in a really peppy voice. If a guy doesn't respond with an equally friendly voice, I get freaked out. I live in an area where it's not weird to run into other runners or bikers at 5 a.m., and almost all of them are very friendly. Just every once in a while, one of them doesn't respond. I never know if it's because they have earbuds in and can't hear me or if they're a genuinely scary person. I carry pepper spray and hope I never have to use it. Story 68. A few years ago, a delivery driver like Uber Eats couldn't find my address, so he called me and then must have saved my number. When he delivered the food, it was kind of creepy. I felt like he tried to look inside my house, but then I didn't really think much of it at that point. After a while, he sent me multiple messages saying things like how he wanted to get to know me, that I was so pretty, etc. I just straight up blocked him and reported it in the app. A few hours later, someone rings my bell, and when I look through, it's him. I didn't answer or say anything, and a few minutes later he left, but I was considering calling the police. Looking back, I probably should have. I don't know what his intentions were, but I was home alone, and that was absolutely terrifying.